In this video, we'll take a look at how we can identify what IP address has been assigned to an ATA 192 3PCC or an ATA 191 3PCC via DHCP. This is something you may need to do when you're first deploying the ATA and you're needing to go within the ATA perhaps to update the firmware or do some type of troubleshooting. So what we're going to leverage here, there's a feature on the ATA where we can plug an analog phone. In this case, I'm going to use port number 1 to connect my analog phone. And then when the ATA boots up and stabilizes, it's in runtime basically, we'll type in 4 asterisks and it will type in 110 and the pound symbol, or the number sign if you will. This can be done either on the ATA 192 model. Again, these are the 3PCC versions. The actual part number has a 3PW, so sometimes this may throw folks on a curveball a tad. Or we can do the same technique on ATA 191, again being a 3PCC model. One item to note is with the ATA 192, it does act like a small router. You do need to plug the PC into the Ethernet port, this middle port right here, and you do need to make sure that the network port is also plugged in, because if the network port is not plugged in, then the built onboard DHCP server that would be giving the IP address to your PC for management purposes, since this is set up as a router from factory, that DHCP function to work, the network port, the WAN port if you will, does need to be in upstate. And it getting basically a DHCP IP address. So if this is in a downstate and non-functional, then the results you'll see is the Ethernet port, the LAN side of it if you will, that normally would be pre-configured at 192.168.15.1, and if you plug in a PC, the expected IP address the PC would get would be 192.168.15.100. This may not function if the network port is not plugged into your WAN or LAN, if you will. So just be aware that can be a little bit different. That concept is not applicable to the ATA 191. If you notice, there is no Ethernet port, so this acts like a pure ATA. There's no router function, if you will. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I've plugged in an analog phone into phone port 1, and we're going to go ahead and punch in 4 asterisks. And then we're going to punch in 110 with the pound sign.
92.168.1.20. Configuration menu. Please enter option followed by the pound key or hang up to exit.
I'll do it one more time.
168.1.20. Configuration menu. Please enter option followed by the key.
Okay, so one other item I wanted to touch upon is the unit I just used is actually registered to WebEx calling. And what happens basically is, although the ATA 192, as I mentioned, acts like a router, there is a bridge mode. So once you're onboarded to WebEx calling, I'm using an example where it's onboarded to WebEx calling, so your mileage may vary if you're using a different service. If that service will keep the ATA 192 in routed mode, or if it'll change it into bridge mode. But in any case, the example I have is registered to WebEx calling. So what happens basically is it is placed into bridge mode. So at that point of time, once it's onboarded, there's really no usage of this Ethernet port per se. it will actually give you the IP address of what it's getting on the WAN LAN, because this is now a bridged mode device. Basically, it's acting like a 191. One other note to keep in mind is with WebEx calling, and this may also apply with other cloud service providers, is once the unit is onboarded to WebEx calling, you don't have access to the web interface of the ATA. So even if you get an IP address using the technique we show here, the 4 asterisks, and then you type in 110 with the pound sign or number sign, if you will get a prompt to log in. However, the credentials are machine generated, and it is not something that a customer would have access to. So what I'm really showing here is really focused on pre-deployment troubleshooting. If you're trying to onboard the ATA, or you're having other issues with ATA not getting DHCP IP address, not being able to get internet access, etc., etc. In any case, hopefully this video helps you with identifying the IP address of your ATA 192 3PCC or the ATA 191 3PCC. Thank you.